I am Rasoul Farrokhi, who was born in the year 1986 in the city of Tehran, and I'm single. Since approximately the year 2016, I've been living alone and independently, and I have no intention of getting married at all. In February 2018, I came home late from outside. It was around 12 or 1 at night. I came home, then I noticed my throat was really hurting a lot, and I was feeling sick, like I had a cold, and my throat pain was really severe. I actually have really large tonsils, at least that's what the doctor always says. For example, my tonsils are maybe 4 or 5 times bigger than a normal person's. I've even thought about having surgery a few times, but the doctors didn't take responsibility for it that way. One of them was willing to do it, but it would have been a really big incision, and for example, the risk was high. They said, we accept this risk. But I didn't go through with it, and for years now I've been living with it. It bothers me, and then it even caused an incident that happened that way. One night I came home in a state where my jaw was hurting quite a lot, causing me significant discomfort and pain. I decided to take a few pills to help with the pain, and I had also found a yellow French lozenge, the kind that you suck on slowly to soothe your throat and mouth. It kind of eased the pain a little. So I was in that state and I felt a bit better, so I thought, okay, I'll go to sleep. I went and lay down properly. I quickly fell asleep, then I realized I could breathe a little. So at first I moved my head a bit. I moved my head around a few times in different directions. Eventually I got tired. I took the pillow out from under my head, flipped it over, and put it back. My head ended up resting on the edge. I noticed that, for example, my breathing got better when the surface under my head was flat. Then I don't know why, but even though I'm tall and my height isn't short, that night I managed. For example, I lay diagonally like this across the width of the bed so my legs would fit and I could stretch them out comfortably. I settled into that position, lay down, and as soon as I closed my eyes, I don't know how much time had passed. Suddenly I saw that I was standing in the alley, standing there, and it felt really strange. For example, I was looking around thinking, what am I doing in the alley at this time of night? What reason do I have to be out here at night? Then I was worried, like, what if someone sees me? Like, it's the middle of the night and I'm just standing in the alley. What am I even doing here? That was the situation. Suddenly, as I was just standing there thinking, why am I standing in the alley? For a moment, it was like I had an out-of-body experience. I saw myself from a little further away, from inside, standing there like that. It was as if I was inside and the whole wall in front of me was raining down. This is how it felt. It was as if only I was left, along with our own wall and our own house. Something like wind, like a storm. I don't know. I'm saying it was something like that, but it was as if a sudden, forceful blow, almost like an invisible force, came unexpectedly from the side and hit me, throwing me like this. I was lifted into the air like I had been shot, as if it had that kind of power like a bullet. It was as if I had been shot like this and I was flying upward. The higher I went, everything, including the airplane, kept getting smaller and smaller before my eyes. The whole time I was worried that eventually this wind would stop and I might fall. I was constantly anxious about that as I kept going higher and higher. As I kept going, I got even more anxious. I reached the clouds and passed through them. You know how, when you come out above the clouds, everything seems to be beneath you, like it's all under your feet? It has a beautiful feeling, a kind of dry beauty. When I saw that scene, it was as if I had come out of the clouds and was looking down. For a moment I thought, because I was supposed to be inside the clouds, everything was always blurry, like everything was white and hazy. That's how things are. I didn't see anything at all, but when I came out, it was really beautiful. Then after that, another patch of cloud came and blocked the view again. I could really feel the cold dampness, that wetness, as they say, right on my face. There was a patch of cloud. It passed right across my face and I felt its coolness, and it was a really interesting sensation. It was so cold too. It was cold, but it felt good. I came up from the slope. I went even higher. During this flight, there was nothing in between. It wasn't like I was constantly flying or anything. It was very clear. I don't know, it was like I was just floating, just suspended, like that. It's not like, for example, you're riding a plane that's going somewhere, or like a physical body that's attached to a string, where I keep looking at something, then suddenly I go and come back. I come back again to this floating state, again, like, for example, I look at the ground, then I come back. Here I look at the sky, I stop, I keep looking, and then I come back again. This beautiful, fluid place seemed to satisfy my curiosities, it would respond. Whenever I got curious about something, this place would somehow satisfy my curiosity. Then the next point was exactly like this. For example, I would look at the ground and say to myself, I hope I don't fall. Then, the next glance, for example, was at the clouds. I noticed, oh, there are clouds, there's a coolness around the clouds. And again my curiosity was satisfied. In short, we kept going up from the clouds, and I reached a place where I saw everything was endless blackness, just black, stretching to infinity, with nothing there, only pure darkness. When I saw this darkness, I wondered, so what happened to the earth? I looked at the earth and saw it. It was like a stone that emits its own light, extremely bright, infinitely radiant. But its brightness wasn't like a lamp that dazzles your eyes. It was more like a stone that is dull, yet gives off a lot of light. For example, its light had reached almost to the Earth's atmosphere. I also saw the layers of the atmosphere. If I remember correctly, there were 5 or 6. The layers were all very orderly, but their sizes were different. The first one from the top was smaller, the second one was much wider. As for the rest, I can't quite remember. Maybe there were 3 or 4 more. I don't remember. I can't really recall, but I do remember that they were different sizes, and the biggest one was the second layer. I was saying, for example, these are the layers of the atmosphere. Like when they say the atmospheric layer, that's the layer where, for instance, a spaceship burns up or a meteor burns up. That's it. Because at that time, I hadn't read the Quran at all, and I didn't have any beliefs back then either. I did believe in God, meaning that I would say, there is a God who listens to us, who hears our prayers and is aware of our thoughts and feelings, but that's it. Yes, I didn't accept anything else, like, except for God, I didn't accept anything else at all, not any other beliefs or ideas. That's how I was. That's the way I thought and felt during that time in my life. I saw the earth and I also saw its mantle, and I felt a sense of longing. For example, imagine how beautiful the scene is when you see the sunrise or sunset. This blue light from the earth made the oceans or the sky take on color, meaning the color of the oceans isn't actually blue. Actually, the blue that we talk about is white. It's as if this blue light that the earth itself has makes our oceans appear blue. I don't know. The light comes to our sky, hits the layers of the atmosphere, and the layers of the atmosphere reflect it. It was like a colored vapor, that's how it was. There were some gases, like vapor, very gentle vapor, that's how it was. It was like a barrier that would break it, its light was scattered, and it had taken on a blue color, for example. Now, if I want to explain this a bit more, because it was really interesting to me too. Now, when you look at the sunrise, for example, when the sun is just about to rise, we think the sky is black, right? There's no light. But if you pay close attention, little by little, first it turns purple-blue, then it gets lighter and lighter, and then, as they say, it becomes sky blue. We have a soft transition, but if you pay attention at first, it's violet. This ray, now, why don't we see it? For example, there was a blue, like the blue of new lamps, very bright and special. It passed over the earth. For example, the attention from the earth was finished. I went further again. I went past the plane trees, got about 5 meters from the moon, passed by it, and had a beautiful view of the moon's surface. I could see the heart, I had it in view. I look and see how much dead soil it has, like a soil similar to our own black cement, or, for example, the soil on top of volcanoes. It was that kind of soil, but it was heavy soil. It was exactly like our own black cement, but it was very lifeless, and everything was covered in it because of the breathing problem. I kept thinking, if I breathe even once on the surface of the moon, will I die? For example, there was so much dust, like a place that hasn't been cleaned for thousands of years. I was covered in dust. It also had that same dead soil. Then the entire surface of the moon seemed to be covered with this soil for 15 or 20 years. It's like something really hot that has cooled down. And for example, Mars, well, you see, they show that Mars has a lot of rocks. The rocks are kind of hot. It's as if, for example, the machines they send there, their tires would get torn up by these rocks. But the moon wasn't like that. The moon is such that it's as if when you step on it, your foot sinks in like you're stepping into soft soil. That's how it feels. Then, does something inspire everyone? He was saying that these craters aren't just random, you know. For example, they bring some people here to the moon as a punishment. They leave them wandering around on the moon, and it keeps spinning for years. It was a punishment, a torment. He said they bring some people here, but no one has said who. This was the inspiration I got. He said they bring some people and leave them alone on the moon all by themselves. They stay there by themselves until the very end. This, too, was a kind of torment. It was its own form of punishment. After I finished looking at the moon, I saw a circular light ahead of me. It was as if it had torn through the darkness of space. At first, I saw it from a distance. Its light was somewhere between white and yellow. It was round, with an opening maybe about 2 meters wide, but it wasn't a tunnel. Some people say they saw a tunnel. No, I didn't see a tunnel. It was a light, as if it had opened up, an opening as if it had appeared. 2 meters. For example, the diameter was 2 meters. I went closer to it. I stood about 3 or 4 meters away from it. When I say I went closer, it wasn't really my choice. I had no control over myself. I had no say in when to go or when to stop. I just kept standing there, and each time, a bit of my curiosity was satisfied. It was as if I had always had these questions from long ago, and now they were being answered for me. That's how it felt. I went closer to the ground and stood near that light, and I looked inside the light. I saw that it was a very lush, vibrant, and incredibly green plain stretching out before me. It was grass, but unlike ordinary grass, each blade that grew up would split into 2 branches like this, one by one, all perfectly clean without any dust, very neat, and the grass was spaced out evenly. You know how usually grass is all tangled, dirty, and messy in the soil? But this wasn't like that at all. It was very orderly. Each blade would grow up, split into 2 branches, and have a cluster of tiny flowers. There was an elderly lady, a very old woman. An old woman, I hadn't seen her before, stood right in front of this opening. I don't know what to call it, like a layer or something. It was something like smoke or maybe steam, very gently moving in a clockwise direction. It was spinning very slowly, barely moving in a clockwise direction, and we kept going deeper into it. The steam and smoke and all that had a light mixed in, somewhere between white and yellow, swirling around here. It was like a barrier, almost like an entrance or something, but it made it so I couldn't see inside very well. I saw a woman, an old lady, sitting there. She had gathered a bouquet of flowers for me, all ready. There was also an old man, or maybe just a man. I don't know, maybe around 55 or 60 years old, I'm not sure. He looked about that age, was wearing a suit jacket, and seemed to be in the middle of picking flowers. He had only gathered about half of them and then just stopped. It felt like we had arrived before he was finished with his task. The whole scene was frozen, like everything had just stopped right there in front of us. Even the person in front of him was holding a bouquet, but everything was completely still, as if time had frozen. I saw these old women and old men who were holding flowers, and I was honestly really surprised, like they had come to welcome me. And let me say something. When I say they came to welcome me, it's because, for example, in Mr. Mazoon's program, I saw that they say the deceased come to welcome you. So now, When I say they came to welcome me, that's what I mean. But at that time, I just knew they had come to welcome me, even though I hadn't even seen Mr. Mazun's program. Up until the year 1401, I had never watched his show. One time a friend of mine was here, and I was just randomly watching this welcoming scene, and suddenly I saw some things. Two other people were talking about some issues that matched exactly what I had experienced, and I was surprised, like, what is this? Like, what is this program? For example, this was being discussed in that place. It was only there that I became familiar with, for example, Mr. Mazun's program. It's only in the past 2 or 3 years that I've become familiar with his programs, and even then I haven't really watched them or had any information. I had absolutely no information about dying or what happens when you die. No beliefs at all. I didn't have any of those either. You can add all of that too. For this story that I'm telling you, I saw this poor guy, like an old man or old woman, and I said, well, this is heaven. When I said it's heaven, suddenly I thought, so I must be dead. If I'm going to heaven, then I'm dead. I was aware of that, and that's how it was. I was aware the whole time that as I'm seeing this, it means I'm dead. I just wanted to decide to go in, like to go inside. For example, how beautiful the scene was, like at that moment, as I was deciding to go inside, there was a reason for it. There was this field of white light to choose from. It was like a wall from top to bottom. This was at the end of the field, meaning when these fields ended, it was as if there was a white wall. At the end of all these fields, behind this white light, I was feeling God's presence. The intensity of this feeling was so strong. All I kept saying was, let me go inside, let me get closer, let me reach closer to that. To get closer to the light, to get closer to God. The pull of this attraction was so powerful, I couldn't even believe it myself. For example, I said, my God, I've reached it, I'm close to God. Because, I've always, at least for me, it's always been like this. I've always felt this sense of distance, of separation from God. This feeling has been with me since childhood. But it was as if I had reached Him there. Being close to God was so beautiful for me, like I felt I had reached God and there was no more distance between us. All I wanted was to go inside, to get closer to that light, to reach it. With that light, that's all I wanted. I thought a man's voice asked me, are you going inside? Either you go inside now or you go back, right now. Either you go in or you return. This man's voice, like a 50-year-old, such a voice, I can't even describe it. Are you going in or are you going back? I was drawn toward the voice. The voice seemed to come from a specific place. For example, its distance was clear, it was a few meters away from me, and I could clearly sense that. It was just a few meters away from me, but there was nothing there, nothing at all. As I said, I couldn't see anything physical. But I knew that it was one of God's agents, one of God's angels, for example, right there a few meters away from me. At the same time as I felt this, I also sensed two presences above my head at a particular angle. They were about 2 meters away from me, and they didn't say a single word. For example, nothing was exchanged between us verbally. But these two were 2 meters away from me, and that one was a few meters away from me. For example, even this light was about 4 meters away from me. It was something like that. For example, imagine two behind me, one in front. The light is on my right hand. It's spinning, saying, let's go, we'll come back. When it said this, at the same time I was receiving a stream of information. For example, their positions became clear, like who they were became clear. Then why should I go inside? Or why shouldn't I go inside? That also became clear. They told me these things. This angel, who was usually with him, informed everyone that you have a serious major sin, and then for it to be finished, for example, you also added other major sins to it, so it would be completed, and then you still have this from me about that thing, and then, for example, I said this sin feels so heavy, Its burden really weighs on me. Should I go in or not? I tried to decide. Then I saw the white lights and thought, if I go in, maybe they just won't let me reach the pillar. I thought about that a lot. It was really hard for me. Like, for example, it's not like the Quran, like I'm not supposed to look, but I always felt like there was something to my right. Even if I entered this light, I felt like I wasn't supposed to look to my right, to this place on the right. I don't know what it was or where it was, but it was like an inspiration that if you go inside and turn to the right, you'll see a whole different world. You'll witness some torments, you'll pay for your sins, and you'll be purified. It was like an inspiration. If you go to the end and turn right, you enter a different world, see torments, pay for your sins to be purified. For example, you come here, but even here wasn't really my place. I wanted this body, maybe because you did something good or helped someone, like a homeless person. This poor guy was really so thin and frail. He looked at him and saw he was homeless. This poor guy was so worn out, as they say. He didn't have much sense left, his mind basically destroyed. He understood things, got everything, but because of his addiction, he would say irrelevant things. Then someone else would come, and at that time, he used to come to my restaurant, and I would give him food and some money, like 10 or 20 tomans, which was a day's wage back then. At first he was embarrassed to accept it, but I insisted. He would leave. He would leave and then reappear, for example, a few days later or a few days after that. He would be there again, just as he always had been. I was having shillik with a dear friend. This shillik was also upset and said, for example, hey, are you doing this? For example, these guys, as we say, have become spoiled, or every day they want to come here and embarrass me in front of the customers. Then this, here, it's an environment. He returned often, upsetting my partner over embarrassment and hygiene. I often argued with my partner about this. I didn't want him at the door, since that makes people uncomfortable. Still, I did my job and helped him while I was there, but after that, I never returned for years. I didn't really continue working much. Now I've hit a significant stumbling block in my progress, and it's really slowing me down. For example, I quit my job and everything, so I really didn't continue with anything. He asked, are you going in or coming back? I thought, what will happen if I go in? What if I don't? I was hesitant, leaning against the wall. Look, there's something about telepathy. Everyone talks about telepathy. I grabbed that angel, that servant of God, and said, my mother will be upset if I'm not around. I told him I promised my sister I would look after her, things like that. There's something about this telepathy everyone talks about, or if I say it's fake blood. It wasn't like I'd think something and the other person would just know. It was as if there was no distance between us. Whatever you thought, it was like saying it out loud. For example, if I wanted to think about how beautiful red is, it was as if I had said it, as if I was saying how beautiful the color red is. It would come to whenever you saw it. And whatever they thought, it was as if they had told me, like, for example, this or that. We would just understand what the other was saying and what we were thinking and what was really in our hearts. It was completely like you said. This is how it was. Anything I thought, It was as if I had said it and they would understand, that's it. I told them, yeah, if it's like this, my mom will get upset. And, for example, it's not fair, she's young and she can't handle it anymore. I was saying all of this, and when she realized, she turned and, with an order, told the person on the right side of the stage behind me to turn back, to go back to before, to reopen the park scene again. This angel, instead of telling me directly, for example, go back or something like that, was actually giving the order to someone else to turn back my file. She was carefully watching everything, reading it all, and kept sighing with regret, like, poor thing, why did you do this? You had such a good place. You were in such a great spot in heaven, poor thing. Why did you do this? Why did you? She kept saying it, reading and sighing. She kept reading and sighing with regret, reading and sighing over and over again. She just kept reading and sighing, reading and sighing, reading and sighing again and again, reading and sighing, 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 reading and sighing. For example, let's say I committed a sin, so they brought me down to the lowest level. For instance, if I was at the very top, they brought me down to the lowest level where I could be punished. And they gave it to me, they're supposed to give it to me, they're supposed to give it to me. For example, if I do something and my film, he gave that command, he said to return, then I saw everything go black. Sorry, it was just a blink, just a fraction of a second. I blinked. For a moment I found myself above the bed and it felt real. Maybe it was just for the blink that I saw it. Suddenly everything went black. Sorry, it was just a blink, maybe a hundredth of a second. I blinked. For a moment I was above my bed and I became aware. Maybe, as I said, it was just for the blink that I saw my head, and my head was separated from my bed facing the mirror. My head slipped between the bed and wall for a moment, and I noticed, is this how you die, or is this how I died? I saw this. Everything went black, completely black. I couldn't see anything. Absolute darkness. Just imagine. I know what it's like when the blackout happens. Is this how you die, or how I died? I saw everything go black, absolute darkness. I couldn't see anything. Imagine I know my head got stuck. I want to lift my head, but I have no strength. Nothing happens. It's still darkness. I can't see any light, nothing around me. This part of my hand started to feel warm inside. It got warm. There was blood. I realized it was my vein. Blood was flowing inside. It started spinning, 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 and then my heart started beating. That's when I finally started to move my head little by little, little by little. And with a lot of effort, I pulled myself up. I lifted my head up. I lifted my head up, even though I was still down. Now there's no air at all for me at this moment. No matter how hard I try, I can't breathe. They hit me and I struggled to move. I tried to breathe, but my airway was blocked. It had become something strangely big. In a way, I can say this is proof for example, the things I've said. Maybe someone wouldn't believe it, right? When I saw I couldn't breathe here, I started to doubt.
It was really hard. Maybe up until that moment I couldn't breathe, and I thought maybe it's just a matter of repenting. Right away, even though I had no air, I said things like, for example, God, I repent, and those kinds of things that people usually say. Unable to breathe, I doubted and quickly prayed, God, I repent, nearly prostrated. I put my head down on the ground and suddenly I was able to take a breath. It was as if my tongue or whatever it was blocking my throat. Something was coming out, something was coming out. I took a breath, but it kept coming back over and over. Every time I tried to breathe, it would go back in and my breath wouldn't come out properly. It was as if it kept coming back out, like I was blowing it out and it would return. Anyway, this happened, and I thought I didn't have much time left, maybe just a few seconds. I was looking at my phone and I warned my family I might die and asked them to check on me. Then I fasted and prayed, which helped. And interestingly, I always wondered about something. I used to ask myself, at the end of the prayer, when you say salam and turn your head like this, I thought maybe it was because of congregational prayer, that people turn to look at those next to them. I thought that was the reason. But that night it was exactly at dawn, right before morning, when I opened my eyes. About 4 or 5 minutes later, the call to prayer was made. I remember this clearly. Now, there's also something they say about Nur. When you give this salam, if you don't turn your head like that, you're supposed to give salam to the angels behind you. So I said, for example, let me give salam. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. I said, please write it down like this, that my prayer, please write it down, that I repented and was telling them, like, look, I prayed Noor, look, I prayed Noor, please write down my repentance, record my Noor prayer, register it. So that's how my story went. After that, nothing bad happened anymore. Like everyone else, I basically became a different person. I pretty much tried to get myself together. I really put in a lot of effort. It's healthy that I'm waiting for this matter to be clarified too. I tried to get myself together, meaning I put in a lot of effort. It's healthy that I'm waiting for this issue to be clarified, whether I'll be forgiven or not, whether I'll leave or not. I'm not sure about any of this yet, but I tried to become a better person and I'm doing my best. This information doesn't really change the past. Sorry the video turned out long. I just wanted to say I hope you get the message, and whether you keep this video or not is your choice. I'm just taking your time. I wish you continued success and appreciate your work. Thanks for keeping this open.